Call of Duty 3 released in North America on November 7, 2006 for other systems, and on November 19, 2006 for the Nintendo Wii. One of 21 launch titles for the Nintendo Wii. Call of Duty was the third game in the Call of Duty franchise, or maybe the fifth game, depending on how you count them. The first Call of Duty, released in 2003 and developed by Infinity Ward, was a PC exclusive, but a stripped-down single-player focused spin-off of that game, called Call of Duty Finest Hour, released for consoles in 2004. Call of Duty 2, released in 2005 and also developed by Infinity Ward, was a PC and Xbox 360 exclusive, and another stripped-down single-player focused spin-off, called Call of Duty 2 Big Red 1, was developed by Treyarch and released that year on other platforms. The console spin-offs were more commercially successful than their PC counterparts, which led to Activision focusing the franchise on console releases. So, Call of Duty 3, developed by Treyarch, never released on PC at all and was only ever released on consoles. The Call of Duty franchise was created by Infinity Ward. Activision, the publisher, wanted a new game in the series to be released every year, but the games were too complicated for Infinity Ward to accomplish this without severely detracting from the game's quality. So Activision divided development of the series between Infinity Ward and Treyarch, giving each studio about 2 years to develop their game, with staggered releases. Prior to Call of Duty, Treyarch had an eclectic catalog of developed games, and were perhaps best known for their Spider-Man games, which had an, at the time, pretty revolutionary web-slinging mechanic, which is still highly regarded even today. Treyarch developed the Call of Duty 2 console spin-off Big Red 1, which led to them spending the next 20 years essentially doing nothing but developing more Call of Duty games, which leads us to Call of Duty 3. Call of Duty is best known for its multiplayer modes. However, in the Wii version of Call of Duty 3, all multiplayer modes were completely cut from the game. Even the local split-screen multiplayer mode was removed. I could find no explanation for this. My best guess is that with the amount of time it took the developers to make the motion and infrared pointer controls functionable, they didn't have time to get multiplayer working on the Wii version too. But that's just a guess. Whatever the reason, the Wii version is missing the franchise's most popular mode, and is left with just the single-player campaign, which was a major disappointment for fans of the franchise playing on Wii. The Wii version did take advantage of the Wii's unique control scheme. The infrared pointer controls for aiming are practically perfect. Using the pointer to aim your weapons is far more fluid, intuitive, and immersive than DualShock controls. The Call of Duty series was unique when it first released in that instead of gameplay focused on a single, lone gunman operating as a one-man army, like most first-person shooters, it focused on squad-based combat and large set-piece battles, in which the player was supposed to feel like just a single soldier on a much larger battlefield, which would be closer to a true combat experience. So throughout Call of Duty, you are followed by a small squad of soldiers who somewhat intelligently seek cover, lob grenades, and advance on their own. In practice, this is mostly window dressing, and the player will still be doing 90% of the work, but at least it's kind of cool window dressing. The shooting is fast and intense. The player can die very quickly, which forces you to play carefully, but at the same time hanging back isn't very effective, which forces the player to advance into dangerous situations. And a lot of times it is genuinely fun, except when it isn't. Call of Duty single player's real problem has always been that while these huge action set pieces start out feeling really cool, about midway through the player will realize that the campaign is made up of nothing but these huge action set pieces, and the game turns into a repetitive slog. Every single battle in every single Call of Duty game plays out in the exact same way. No matter what weapon you're using, or who your character is, or the setting you're playing in, every encounter is identical, and it's impossible to tell any of them apart. Every single room you get behind cover, lean out the side, slowly kill each enemy hiding behind their own cover at the other side of the room, then move on to the next room, and do the exact same thing again, forever, for the entire campaign. Call of Duty has always occupied a weird space between realism and fantasy. It looks like a completely ridiculous over-the-top action movie, but it punishes the player for behaving like an action star. It only rewards you for playing slowly and carefully and spending a lot of time sitting still, hiding, or letting your health recover, which just isn't very fun, and is at odds with the game's cheesy action movie aesthetic. The motion controls in the game are far more mixed than the pointer controls. At this point in the Wii's life cycle, the developers are definitely still in the experimental, let's just try things out phase of motion controls, and a lot of things they're trying are just not working. Sometimes your character will be grappled by a nasty Nazi, and you have to punch your controller repeatedly to fight them off. It feels pretty ridiculous, but it's fun and it works, so this one gets a pass. Next, there are these driving segments. Instead of simply tilting the controller up and down to control the car, which works perfectly in other Wii racing games, Call of Duty decided to get weird with it, and instead you must use both the Wiimote and nunchuck together, holding them up in the air at 10 and 2 o'clock to simulate holding a steering wheel. It is extremely awkward and inaccurate compared to the simpler driving controls in other games. However, it is just slippery and stupid enough to be sort of hilarious and goofy, so this one gets a slight pass too. Finally, the game requires you to use motion controls to set explosive charges. And this is where the motion controls finally just completely fall apart and cease functioning, because these motions require the use of the nunchuck controller, whose motion controls are dramatically less accurate than the Wiimotes. And at launch, developers still hadn't figured out that they should treat the nunchuck like a festering, rotting, stinking sack of animal feces lying on the side of the road. That is, keep the heck away from it. This prompt shows the nunchuck and an arrow pointing to the left. So my assumption was that the game wanted me to swing the nunchuck to the left, but that never once worked. No matter how hard or at what angle I've swung the nunchuck to the left, my character's hands remained stupidly and frustratingly frozen on the screen. So I started just waving my arms in different directions to see what would work, until I ended up frantically and wildly waving my arms around like a wacky inflatable dancing arm flailing tube man, advertising Ford F-150s on the side of the road to morons. Finally, I did get it to work about 30% of the time by pulling the nunchuck aggressively backwards towards my face. The game's campaign tells the story of the real Battle of Chambois, in which English, Canadian, American, and Polish forces surrounded a group of German armies during the Allied invasion of France. The story jumps back and forth between the different nationalities and their different contributions to the battle. And it's a cool way of demonstrating how the war in Europe was not just won by exclusive American grit and determination, but in fact by the coordination of soldiers from across the world working together. Towards the end of the story, these separate narratives start to intersect in genuinely meaningful ways. And it's really cool to see, for example, how something you did as the Polish affects the situation on the ground for the American troops. And that's where my praise for the game's story ends, because that's where the game's story ceases to be anything other than cheap B-war movie schlock. Call of Duty 3's story beats are rushed and shallow. Call of Duty 3 is plainly inspired by Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers, and there are a lot of situations in Call of Duty that weakly imitate those two superior works. For example, in Saving Private Ryan, there's this dramatic scene where one character points his gun at another. This moment is intense, anxious, chaotic, and most importantly, it is earned. The movie has spent a significant amount of time developing these two characters, exploring their strengths and their flaws, and establishing their interpersonal conflict. When that character pulls his gun out, you know exactly who they both are, and you know exactly how they came to be in this moment, and you understand why it is happening. The conflict is only resolved when Tom Hanks' character intercedes with a rare moment of emotional vulnerability and honesty. An identical moment to this one plays out in Call of Duty 3's first mission. There's an argument, then one soldier points his gun at another, but it comes out of nowhere. There's no build up to this moment at all. I wasn't even sure who either of these characters were. Then the moment passes just as quickly. Call of Duty 3's story does this over and over again, imitating serious, profound emotional moments from other works without any of the narrative legwork or emotional depth. Call of Duty squeezes these tiny rushed bits of plot in between long bombastic action set pieces, and it all just feels sort of soulless and nihilistic. There are, of course, plenty of action video games that, similar to this, feature a lot of violence and very little plot. But I think there's something about the World War II setting that makes Call of Duty feel especially soulless. We have so much media based around World War II that is emotional and profound and authentic, that when something like Call of Duty comes around that is so plainly commercial and shallow, and just weakly imitating the emotional beats of greater works, it feels very off-putting. With all that said, the story here barely matters, and you can just ignore it, and I'm sure most players did. Call of Duty 3 is basically a simple and fun war movie game. You jump in, you shoot some bad Nazis, in environments that look like famous movie sets. You don't think very hard about it, and then you jump out again, and forget everything about the game or its story afterwards. The controls usually work, except when they don't, and the gunplay is basically solid except when it seems to be at odds with itself. 4 more Call of Duty games would release for the Nintendo Wii, bringing back the multiplayer modes and rectifying a lot of Call of Duty 3's mistakes with the motion controls. I will review all 4 of those games eventually, because I am going to review every game ever released for the Nintendo Wii or die trying. Oh yeah. Woo! Wee! Woo!